Oh yes, still. Every couple of months, every 2 months, we have, the girls I was with in Special Wireless, we meet every second Friday of the second month, and we have lunch together. And I write to people in Sydney. I always stay with one of the very good men. He married a Melbourne girl. Like some of those men went on to be professors and in the army with us. He was manager of the State Bank in Victoria, and when I used to go over, I was in the chaplaincy from 84 to 94. We used to go over for conferences, and I'd meet him, you know, from the State Bank, and he'd just say, "Miss, would you bring this cup of tea?" And the tray would arrive. And we were only kids. Right. Like the country children were as good as the people in the city, you know, and we learnt a lot. We grew up. We had to grow up. You know, the army, I think, it would make you or break you, and I've seen both happen. So we depended on each other. Not just going home to talk about things. You depended on people for everything, like your work. We did long hours shift of night work. You know, we had 4 hours on, 4 hours off, as much as we could handle, but that concentration all the time. And then going out for when we had leave, and it was sort of growing together. Yes, when we meet now, or not only me, like Aunty Mary, she meets her friends. They still go out together, and it's like as if you're about 20 again.
Yeah.
It is a bond. It's not just my particular unit, but I think our unit is very close because we have to be close, and particularly because we couldn't sort of mix or talk about it, we had to talk among ourselves. It didn't enter your head. None of my family knew what I was doing. You know, you couldn't talk, so I don't know what it is, but I would say that those army friends I made during that nearly 4 years are still my very dear friends. Well, as you know, Jack was in Scotland, chopping down trees. Certainly a job that had to be done. Yeah. And what would he worry about? Mick went to New Guinea, but he wasn't in the front. He would have heard bombs dropping and things like that. There wasn't a firing line. Jim only got as far as Darwin, then he had this terrible thing happen to his shoulder, where he, you know, the muscle withered. And Pat went over. He was a fighter pilot, and even though he did fly over England, D-Day they didn't lose as many planes as they thought, so he wasn't actually doing sorties all the time. He was there. In Australia he was an instructor for some time. So they weren't in prisoner of war camp. They weren't shot at, put it that way. But they could have been.
They could have been, but they all seemed to have a... Like it wasn't a sort of tragic element to their war effort, was it?
No, and I doubt if they would have lost... Pat he would have lost some of my friends, I suppose, but they wouldn't have lost good friends like Jack Logan and Manjimup and Manjimup boys. Same with Jack. Jack went away in the forestry with men from Manjimup and Pemberton, so it was still a mateship. So Mick and Jim had their mates, a couple of their mates, I suppose 7 or 8 or 9 of them, in the actual unit with them. So no, they didn't lose anybody.
And,
you don't hear them talking.
So in that sense, they weren't traumatised by the war.
No, not to. No, they weren't traumatised. Like these men that you saw in that film, Channing. I don't know how they even existed when they came out. And the men in Germany. This boy I used to tell you about, that you said what happened at the beginning of the war, he'd say, I'll see you on the front. When I was in the hospital, I met a man who was with him when he was shot. And that man told me, the patient in the hospital told me that had this man had medical treatment, he would have lived. He died the next day in agony. My brothers wouldn't have seen that. They wouldn't have seen people getting shot. Not that I know of anyway.